Ladies and gentlemen, Ukrainian or English or both, so whatever works best for you. I think it's important to understand why Britain and why the UK is quite important in the whole issue and the whole conflict that we're seeing today. I think, as the previous speaker just mentioned also, the United Kingdom was one of the signatories of the Budapest Memorandum. And I think the UK government now have very closely been studying the wording, and the answer is basically the feedback on that is that the UK has adhered to all the wording in that, as opposed to Russia. Russia hasn't. It was signed in '94. It was the legal wording was very weak, and unfortunately, seeing the consequences of that today. So the role that the UK is playing now more is a fact that it's focusing more on what it can do, and the battle will be more understanding that Vladimir Putin is more afraid of the banks than he's of the tanks. And the sanctions will actually be able to have possibly, in the short term, more implications than any sort of military assistance. The reason why the UK is, I mean, the latest opinion polls out this month, they clearly show that more than half, nearly 60% of Britons are either very closely or fairly closely following the story in Ukraine. When asked, generally speaking, where do your sympathies lie, more with Russia or more with Ukraine? 3% sympathies lay with Russia, 53% with Ukraine. And it's quite interesting to see the difference in the political parties. For example, the Liberal Democrats, 0% Russia, 69% Ukraine. And the big question always is, do you think the situation between Ukraine and Russia is something that should concern Britain and Western countries? And the majority say yes, this is something that should concern Britain. So what has the UK done so far, and what is it doing? The main issue has been the financial sanctions. London is loved by many Russians, by many Ukrainians. I think I'll touch on briefly the oligarchs also, what role they play in London and what role they have played. So London is loved by many for various reasons. So the way to hit them at the moment is really to go for the assets freezes, visa bans, and those are very tangible, especially the list that has already come out with the names of Russian individuals and Ukrainian individuals, the ones that are being targeted by financial sanctions and visa bans. For example, there are 2,007 Russian children studying in boarding schools. The real estate, we're talking about billions of dollars of prime real estate in London that is held by Russians. So the government now is very closely considering what to do next. You may have seen the leaked document that was a photographer took a photo of when one of President Cameron's advisors was walking in, and the risk is, the they have on the city of London, the financial heart of the capital, if more sanctions are introduced. At the moment, the government, in its rhetoric, it's coming along in full support of Ukraine, following the opinion polls. I think we have to understand that the UK has elections coming up in May 2015. So obviously all politicians are very sensitive to what any escalation may or may not have on their ratings upcoming. But at the moment, it's the opinion polls are all showing that there is Britons do favour imposing trade sanctions on Russia. They do favour withholding visas, and also freezing Russian assets in Western banks. There is no, however, in terms of expelling Russia from the G8 or giving financial aid to the Ukrainian government, there isn't a lot of support in this, and there is even less support on giving military aid to the Ukrainian government, 11%, and deploying Western troops to defend Ukraine from Russia, only 10% of Britons favour that. So the message that we're getting from London is that there's no the likelihood of seeing British boots on Ukrainian soil anytime soon is extremely unlikely. In terms of military assistance, likewise. There are, however, more and more rhetoric and more messages coming along that Britain could consider supporting some sort of technical aid and supplies. I think that that's being decided over the next couple of weeks, also depending how events will unfold. In terms of Britain has recognized the Crimea referendum as illegitimate. It has not recognized the new authorities in the Crimea, and it's fully supporting the interim government, and it's also starting to express its support for the upcoming presidential elections, and it's fully backing that the elections do take place on May 25th here in Ukraine. Last Wednesday, presidential candidates Petro Poroshenko and at the time also presidential candidate Vitaly Klitschko, who still didn't announce, they were in London together with Anrdy Shevchenko, who Yulia Tymoshenko was also invited to attend that meeting. She didn't attend. Anrdy Shevchenko was there representing Batkivshina Butte. And they created a very positive impression on the British parliamentarians, on the leader of the opposition, and also on the Prime Minister himself. Their presentation skills were excellent, well polished, well honed messages, and the message that from London was coming along that these are people we can do business with. And there is a bit of excitement that real change is in the air, that it's we're going to see some changes. I think the issue that the UK government also has is the history of 1938. The analogies now coming along with the policy of appeasement, when Hitler was allowed to move in both to the Sudetenland and the Austrian referendum, the plebiscite. So I think that's also some interesting analogies that we are seeing. There were attempts to make analogies between the upcoming referendum in Scotland in next year in September with the analogies of the Crimea referendum, but the government very strongly sort of rebuked any possible comparisons, and explaining why, and they have come across with strong messages, saying that these two ideas are totally incomparable. The oligarchs, as I mentioned, Ukrainian oligarchs also all very present, all very visible in London. All the major Ukrainian oligarchs are in some shape or form present in London. They, as many do, they all love London. They many have their homes there. And this is another thing where both for Ukrainian oligarchs and Russian oligarchs, London is still seeing what it can do to insert sort of pressure on them. So in terms of even the media coverage that's been received, protests that have been taking place outside the oligarchs' offices and homes, that has received a lot of interest in the media. And the question is really, as I say, especially now with the Russian oligarchs, the question is how much further and how quickly will the British government push to really hit those that are supporting President Putin and his regime, and whether or not we will see further sanctions. The initial messages are that if there's any more pressure coming onto Ukraine from Russia, there will be a response from the UK government. Also, in terms of energy dependence, the UK are seeing, the UK itself is pushing now for shale gas. So the view from London is that also that here in Ukraine, shale gas could be a game changer within the next 5 to 10 years. If shale gas is successfully, the exploration takes place over the next couple of years here in Ukraine, this could have a massive effect on dependency on the Russian gas. So this could be a big game changer for Ukraine. You've probably seen some of the tongue-in-cheek campaigns also coming up regarding Donetsk, which was founded in 1869 by John Hughes, and his first name was called Yuzovka. There have been the tongue-in-cheek campaigns about saying that Donetsk should become part of the UK. I think it's quite interesting how that was also picked up by the large media, including the BBC. But it just shows, the fact that what Russians have done in Crimea and are possibly planning to do further across Ukraine, is considered totally sort of illegitimate and unacceptable by the governments in London. I think what the UK now is also focusing on, it's combating the propaganda. The propaganda has been very strong coming out of Moscow. What was even seen at the beginning is that the Western correspondents that were covering Ukraine, they were highlighting it often from a pro-Russian angle. Why? Because many of these were Moscow-based correspondents that were flown in to Kiev or flown into Crimea, and they had already been under the influence of Russian sort of media influence, and they already were coming in with this influence as they a priori were arriving in Ukraine. So I think that's one of the issues really to work, the journalist understanding that not necessarily bringing them in from Moscow, but bringing in from other countries of the world where they, may have a more open and a more sort of broad perspective on the situation. The Ukrainian language BBC service was cut last year, 1.5 years ago. So this is now also a very good opportunity to give a rebirth to the Ukrainian service of the BBC. What's been left has been a bit of internet and not a lot of radio, but the BBC service was an excellent, extremely high caliber service. And now is a very good time to sort of push this forward, because the UK is also one of the things that is considering helping with Ukraine is actually countering the propaganda and helping the government in coming across with the messages to present to the press. So in a nutshell, I think yes, many are frustrated. Many would like to see much more action coming from the UK, but as I said, very unlikely that we'll see any military assistance coming over, anytime soon or anytime in the future whatsoever. However, the UK government now is looking at ways to increase its support of Ukraine. So I think, over the next weeks and months, we will see more movement on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Чи є в нас запитання? Any questions?
Kiev Post Market. You mentioned that economic containment is far more effective than military containment or other measures. What would it take for the City of London to target whole sectors of the Russian economy, or close off its banking system to Russians? Would it have to entail military incursion into Ukraine?
I think at the moment no one's going to give you a clear answer on that, but I think it would need some sort of escalation at the moment, and I think it would be very, very difficult for the UK government not to increase either third stage sanctions or any further sort of blocking of the banks if there were to be a military escalation and military intervention coming in from either the southeast or even the north. Then I think it would be very difficult for the UK government not to increase sanctions. So yeah, I mean, there are, even 4 out of 10 of the top Russian companies are listed on the stock exchange, and we're talking billions, hundreds of billions worth of substantially owned by the Russian government. So this would be really hitting it where it hurts, and it would be very effective. And I think this may actually still be a deterrent in some shape or form to restrain any further aggression of that sort of caliber.
So if I don't have any questions, I'd like to thank you for coming, Mr. Hunder.
Thank you.
Thank you.